Well, hello and welcome to Travel Talk Tuesday, episode 6. This is Gabriel. You don't know this. This is our seventh, but we're calling it our sixth time of doing this. I made a little mistake a couple weeks ago and we're just rolling with it.
Okay.
But I want to welcome our guest today. We've got Gabriel with us. Gabriel, tell us how to pronounce your last name because, like I told you before, I know if I try, I'll mess it up. And tell us who you are.
Thank you, Francis. So good afternoon and good morning to everyone across in the United States or anybody who's listening to us from different parts of the US. My name is Gabriel and I am a tour guide based in Spain and Portugal. So I'm a tour director and a guide for most of directions tours trips across different parts of Europe. I'm going to be your tour director and your guide on the trip in Italy this coming April, and also I'll be the tour director and the guide for our trip in Portugal and in the English Christmas markets tour coming up in December. So my full name is Gabriel Bilalov. Everyone really just calls me either Gabe or just Gabriel. But the proper way to pronounce my last name is Bilalov. So it's a bit easy, but if you don't get it right, that's fine. Just call me Gabe.
I could do that. I have a name that's always mispronounced too, so I understand, and I would have mispronounced it, so that's good. Like Gabe said, he is going to be the guide and the tour director on our trip to Italy that's coming up. So I'm excited for those of you who get to meet him. Gabe and I met in did we meet at ABA in
Yes.
January?
Yeah.
We met in January and put our heads together and came up with a couple of great tours in addition to the trip to Italy. We've got a fabulous trip to Portugal in October. And then we have the Christmas markets trip that is the end of November, going into the first week of December. I'm particularly excited about both of these trips because I'm going on them. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I thought it would be nice to have Gabe join us today and kind of give us a little overview of these two trips. You want me to pull up your slideshow for Portugal?
Of course. Yeah, that would be perfect.
All right. We our technology only worked as well as technology works, and Gabe couldn't have control. So you just tell me whenever you want me to move along.
All right, perfect. Well, to begin with, I'd like to welcome everyone and just say to everyone that you're all invited to join us now this coming October on our Gems of Portugal tour. This is one of my favorite tours I love doing. It's just it's the cream of the crop when it comes to visiting Portugal. And for those of you that don't know, Portugal is this beautiful country that's on the southmost southwestern point of Europe. It's kind of surrounded on one side completely by Spain, and on another side, its entire coast looks out towards the Atlantic. It's a country that kind of has a big mixture of this Mediterranean vibe, Southern European vibe, but also as it is a sea-looking nation, it's a nation that is kind of always had its lifestyle and its relationship and its way of life related to the sea. So Portuguese tend to be very good. We're always the best explorers in the world. They were the very first navigators that managed to sail the seven seas and kind of sail to all corners of the world. They also created a mighty empire that kind of where the sun never set. They controlled vast arrays of different areas across this world, from different parts of Africa to some parts of Far East Asia to South America, Brazil, for example. And Portugal is just a stunning country. So Portugal kind of mixes the best of everything to do with both Mediterranean flair, but also a European sort of relaxing way of life. And it has stunning architecture, beautiful history, fantastic food, and amazing wine as well. So this trip kind of encompasses the best of what Portugal has to offer. We're going to be visiting everything from its main capital, Lisbon, to some of its other lesser known towns, but that are just as majestic as Lisbon. We'll also be visiting Porto as well, and we'll be staying 2 nights there. And finishing off the trip, we'll be staying on a lovely village on the outskirts of Lisbon called Sintra, which was home to the former Portuguese kings. And there's quite a number of palaces that we'll be visiting over there, and you'll get to see the different colors of the country and the different levels of beauty that exists in each and every region. So this trip really is a good trip for anybody that is a foodie, that anybody that is a history buff, that anybody that would like to discover a bit of medieval architecture, and anybody that is a big fan, a wine aficionado as well. So if you're a fan of wine, this is the perfect trip for you as well, because we'll be doing quite different variations of wine tasting as well also on this trip. So Francis, if you could just slide over to the next slide, just to begin with. Yeah, right here. So Portugal is a country that kind of it's a small country. It's about roughly the size of the UK, or the size of somewhere between the UK and the size of Ireland. To put in the comparisons into sizes of states in the US, you'd be looking at a country about roughly the size of Maine. It's all facing towards the coastline for the majority, and it's kind of wrapped around, kind of on a kind of hug, surrounded by Spain. Portugal in general, like the Portuguese way of life, it's very relaxed. It's very Mediterranean. It's very food orientated, very family orientated. And when you're in Portugal, you get that feeling of you're in a place where it's time for you to kind of just sit down, enjoy your food, have some nice wine, and soak up everything that you see in your surroundings. Portugal is the main point for everybody in Europe to go on vacation in the summer months and in the winter months as well. So usually, like October and November, it tends to be a place where most Europeans go and visit for their kind of vacation away, or to kind of have a bit of a getaway for a weekend break. And if you move on to the next slide, we can start off then to begin on the delights of what we'll be experiencing. So to begin with, Portugal has a vast array of different things, and I love visiting Portugal. I was only just there yesterday. I was over with a small group, and we were only on a 4-day trip. And every time I'm over there, it's just always something new. There's always something to enjoy, regardless of how long or how short, you're staying there. So we'll begin this trip to begin with, starting off in Lisbon. So our trip is going to be about roughly 8-9 days, and we'll be spending the first 2 nights in Lisbon. So when we'll have everybody arriving into Lisbon early in the morning, I'm going to pick you up in Lisbon Airport. Lisbon Airport is just only about a 2-mile drive away from the city centre. It's pretty close to the centre of the capital. And we're going to be doing a nice walking tour around the old historical quarters of Lisbon. So this tram that you see here, this is a local tram that actually goes across on like the narrow streets of Lisbon. So we'll get the chance to actually walk around these narrow streets and enjoy the kind of the beautiful, colorful houses that are surrounding the streets. Enjoy the lively neighborhoods that exist as well. And we'll get to soak up kind of the proper feeling of what it's like to live in Southern Europe, and what's the way of life for locals that live in these European cities. And Lisbon is the perfect example of the best Southern European city. It has a population of about just under 1 million. It's not too big, not too small. They're very easily accessible, very easy to get around with. Everybody loves Lisbon. Everybody who's been to Lisbon always tends to come back. So it's a city that's bound to capture you, whether you're a city person or not, because it kind of has this flair of being both a city and not a city as well. It kind of gives you kind of that mixed atmosphere of like being also a metropolis, but at the same time kind of a nice town also.
Has a small town feel to it.
Has a small town feel to it, correct, yeah.
Nice.
And if we move on to the next slide and the following one. Okay, so to begin with in our itinerary, we're going to, as I said, we're going to arrive into Lisbon. And on the first day, as I'm going to pick everybody up at the airport, we're going to bring you over to the hotel to have a lovely breakfast. And then afterwards, we're going to set on a short walking tour around the center of Lisbon. And with this walking tour, you're going to see kind of the delights of Lisbon, kind of the main highlights, the scenic spots, and the scenic viewpoints as well. This is one of them right here in the old Alfama quarter, which is the old medieval quarter of Lisbon. And we're going to do a short walk around the kind of the narrow alleys, and you're going to discover like then the intricate history as to why Portugal is the way it is. What are the medieval kind of what's the medieval history of Portugal? What has the city gone through? What has the country gone through? We'll go through the history as well of the Portuguese kings and their the history that Portugal has been through from the time of the navigators in the 15 and 1400s, where they controlled all four corners of the world, to the time when when Napoleon's army invaded and they had to move the capital over from Lisbon over to Brazil to kind of to avoid the French. Afterwards, then, so that's going to be our kind of our plan for day one in the afternoon. In the evening, we're going to head over to a local tavern that's inside a cave, and we're going to enjoy a splendid evening of fado music with dinner. Now, for those of you that don't know fado music is a traditional Portuguese genre that kind of encompasses sort of it's a ballad and it's a sort of a song, it's songs and it's kind of music and melodies tuned towards different aspects of life. So as I mentioned, Portugal is a very sea orientated nation. So fado songs would usually be sung by wives of those fishermen that wouldn't see their husbands for quite a number of months because they'd be out at sea, or quite a number of weeks because they'd be navigating some other corner of the world, or sometimes they would never even actually see their husbands again because they would set out to sea. And as you know, kind of you're at the helms of the Atlantic in those moments, and because of that, they sing melancholical songs in relation to their loved ones, their beloved. The genres do change as well, so they can go from kind of melancholical songs to songs of celebration of when, oh, my husband has returned back from sea. Oh, it's time for us to celebrate. Oh, my beloved, who I was going to marry, has returned, so we're going to get married. It's time for us to cheer. So fado is a really beautiful genre, and it's listening to it live as well. It really is breathtaking, especially when you're listening to it in a quiet tavern with music and enjoying some nice traditional Portuguese food also. So that would be the first day of our trip to Portugal. On day two, then we're going to be visiting the old quarter of Belém. Now, the word Belém actually comes from Portuguese, which is the equivalent of Bethlehem. And the Portuguese are very religious as well, very religious Catholics. And the Belém quarter is one of the best preserved medieval quarters in Europe. It's just on the outskirts of central Lisbon, but it's a place that actually is home to quite a number of different landmarks that everybody knows about. There's the Jerónimos Monastery that was built in the 1500s, and that was built by one of the Portuguese kings to commemorate and kind of to thank God for his ability for being able to conquer such vast arrays of new territories in the New World, such as Brazil and other parts as well, and the colonies of Africa. And the king built the Jerónimos Monastery to kind of commemorate it, to kind of give a thank you to God, as to thank you for providing me with this, and this is how I will thank you. So he built a very beautiful and huge monastery that has maintained its complete architectural splendor to this day. It's also the burial place of quite a number of different noticeable Portuguese people, such as various different authors that have won Nobel Prizes, artists, actors, and also I'd say the most famous Portuguese of all is, well, not Cristiano Ronaldo because he's still alive, obviously, but Vasco da Gama, the guy who sailed across over to the Indias from the Cape of Good Hope through through what is today South Africa. He's also buried in there, so he's counted as one of the most important Portuguese people to have ever existed. So we'll visit the Jerónimos Monastery and also the Tower of Belém. And the Tower of Belém was kind of the last point of view for those sailors that would set out to sea and sail across the Atlantic. And it's a beautiful castle that was also a former prison at some stages. It was also a naval base throughout the centuries, and it's perched right on the shores of the Tagus River, overlooking the Atlantic. So we'll be visiting both these attractions. And then afterwards in the afternoon, as our hotel will be centrally located in the Alfama quarter, in one of the old medieval quarters of Lisbon, you'll have some free time to enjoy as well the kind of the localities, and you can go for a walk and you can enjoy either a nice coffee in one of the local cafes, or sit down and have some nice dinner in one of the local restaurants. So our hotel that we're staying in, the Hotel Mundial, it's a stunning hotel that actually has panoramic views of the entire old quarter of Lisbon. and you'll have the chance to either see both the medieval quarter, or you can also look out towards the Atlantic. So you'll be lucky to have one of either views when you're going to be staying there. And we're going to be staying in the Hotel Mundial for 2 nights. So afterwards, when we finish, when we do our 2 night stay in Lisbon, we're going to set out to discover the Portugal in itself, and proper Portugal, as I like to say. So we'll be heading eastwards towards the region of Alentejo. Now, this region would be something that would be known as Portugal's Tuscany. It's a region that is sun-kissed. It's a place that's surrounded by olive groves, and it's also Portugal's main cork plantation region. So if any of you are fans of the bottle of wine, you'd know that each bottle of wine is usually propped up with a cork prop. So cork is actually provided by a bark that is grown specifically in only few regions of the world, some parts of southern Spain, but mainly the majority, 80% of it is grown in the Alentejo region in Portugal. So we'll be visiting a cork farm, and we'll discover how cork is actually produced, how it's harvested. And in the cork farm as well, we're also going to be visiting a local winery that provides organic wine. And we'll get to do some wine tasting from the very splendid wines of the Alentejo region. And you'll get to have some nice wine tasting and to see the different variations of wine, and see how they're grown, how the grapes are harvested, and see what mixes and what blends provide the perfect tone for a nice Alentejo wine. That's going to be one of our first wine tasting events that we're going to have on this trip. And there's going to be a couple more then afterwards that I'd like to explain after this. So when we finish with our wine tasting in one of the local cork farms in the Alentejo region, we're then going to set out and visit the medieval town of Évora. So Évora was known before previously as Little Jerusalem, because it was a place where you'd have all three of the big religions in the Middle Ages kind of coexisting one by one. So back in the 1200s and 1100s, you'd have Moors who were Muslims, Jews and Christians living all together in this one town, and they were living in complete harmony. And because of that, the town actually gained its name as Little Jerusalem, or Portugal's Jerusalem. So you had all of these people that were coexisting, different religions, different ways of life, and they all managed to actually live in complete harmony when they were in Évora. But Évora is also really well known for its mysticism, and anytime you are in Évora, there's this feeling. It's a place that's really well known for its very strong energy. So you do feel like it is a sacred place, but at the same time, it's a place that is relaxing, and a place that anybody can enjoy, and a place where you can worship and just kind of be who you are. But at the same time, it's also a place that kind of does have a lot of history. And we're going to have the chance to actually walk around the old quarter of Évora as well, and we'll see kind of the historical delights. It was a town that was settled by the Romans over 2,000 years ago, and there are still some ancient architectural landmarks that exist there, that existed from the time of the Romans, such as the Roman Temple, which is, the entire structure is just still there as it was, like with its columns and kind of with its whole frame. It's amazing to see how such a structure has managed to stand still for over 2,000 years. And apart from that, we'll also be visiting some really peculiar delights and some peculiar landmarks that don't exist anywhere else in the world. One of them is the Chapel of the Bones. Now, for those of you who have never heard of the Chapel of the Bones are, as the saying goes, a chapel of bones. So back in the 1600s, when the local monks at a local monastery were trying to expand their monastery, the only way that they could expand was using the territories that they already had that were under the control of the monastery. And unfortunately for them, the only area that they had existing where they could build up on were in the original burial grounds of the monastery. And they didn't know what to do. So what they did was they actually gathered up all the bones of those that were buried there over the past 300-400 years in the monastery. And they built a chapel in commemoration to everyone that was buried there. So they took out all the burial grounds, and they took out all the bones of those that were laid to rest there. And from the remains of the bones of those people, they made an entirely new chapel in the monastery, made completely out of bones. So it's a bit of an eerie place for those of you that are really into history or into kind of the unique peculiarities of different parts of history and medieval history. This is a really interesting and eerie place for you to visit, and it's one of a kind. Um, I wouldn't say it's spooky. It's interesting. Although you are left in awe after visiting it, though. So it's something like just kind of like you're in a fee. You get a sense of kind of like, oh wow, this is real. Like this medieval history is right here, right in front of me. So it is an experience for everybody to kind of to enjoy once in their lifetime, and of course, it is a one of a kind sort of landmark also. So, and it is highly respected as well. But it provides this kind of sense of like you have this connection both with the past and with the future when you are there. So it's peculiar and also it's very eerie at the same time. So it's a one of a kind experience that I would suggest everyone to kind of see at least for once in their life.
That sounds
And
very interesting.
yeah, and then afterwards, so we're going to spend one night in Evora, and that one night you'll get to also enjoy the town. It's a small little town that's on a hilltop, so you'll get to enjoy and walk around the town and enjoy some free time as well if you'd like. Our hotel, the local hotel, the Mar d'Aqueducto, is actually right next to the historical wall of Evora. So the entire town is actually surrounded by a very well-made medieval wall that's still in existence to this day. So the wall is actually over 600 years old, and our hotel is right next to this wall also. So you'll get to kind of walk around and see the medieval architecture of the wall, see the churches close by, and the hotel itself. It's actually built on a former palatial manor house that was built back in the 1500s. So you'll also get this more history as you're going to be staying in the hotel as well. But I promise you, it's historical, um, but it's beautiful as well at the same time. So you will actually be feeling like as if you're in a palace when you're going to be staying in that hotel. Also,
Sounds great. Next slide.
yeah, if you could please.
All right.
Perfect. So after Evora on day three, we're going to be staying one night there, and we're going to then set out north, heading towards the direction of Porto. Now, this journey to Porto is going to take us roughly 2 days, but in between, we're going to be seeing some of the best sites of Portugal and some of the least touristic sites as well, but some of the best national landmarks. So, on our way up to Porto, we're going to be visiting the town of Tomar. And Tamar is well known for its Convento de Cristo, or the Convent of Christ, which was a convent that was built specifically by the Knights Templar during the medieval period. For those of you that don't know the Knights Templar were those that helped and assisted the Crusaders upon sending messages and sending money over. So anybody that does know their history, you'd know that during the Crusades, when the Christians were fighting to kind of gain back control of the Holy Land, they needed assistance. And the Knights Templar were those that were able to provide the assistance in terms of providing financial assistance, kind of messenger services. And as a thank you for their service, and the Portuguese king gave them a special plot of land as well in the town of Tomar, and they were able to build the Convent of Christ, which is this absolutely stunning convent that includes various different types of architectural marvels. Inside here, if you look up at the very top photograph, this is the inside of one of the chapels that has mosaics going through the entire story of different parts of the Bible as well. And these are paintings that are within the walls that were painted over 800 years ago. They're still very much intact and they still look very fresh. And you go through the entire wall of the convent and you just feel like as if you're a monk that's living back in the 1200s. A really beautiful place to visit. Afterwards, then we're going to be visiting a local tile workshop. And for those of you that don't know, Portugal is really renowned for a couple of things. It's renowned for its good food, especially seafood. It's good for its wine, for its architecture. But also within within that architecture, one of the main things Portugal is really well known for is its mosaics. So mosaics and ceramic tiles are a really big part of Portuguese culture, and sometimes you will have entire houses framed with tiles on the outside that follow a certain pattern. And Tomar is one of these central places, one of these main towns in Portugal where mosaics are produced in mass, and they're done hand by people. So you'll actually get to have the chance to go into one of these workshops and see how a few ladies are actually crafting these mosaics painstakingly, like very skillfully, just using their hands. And this then will be part of another complex mosaical structure, either for a house, providing a kind of a wall pattern for a house, or for the inside of either a beautiful patio or the inside of a beautiful courtyard in one of the old houses in Portugal. Yeah. So after Tamar, we're going to be setting out further north, and this time we're going to be going over towards the town of Coimbra. Now, Coimbra is a university town. It's home to one of Portugal's oldest universities that date back from the 1200s. And Coimbra was originally the place where the Portuguese navigators would study their form of navigation. So they'd study astronomy, they'd study the sea, they'd study navigation, they'd study distances, they'd study both mathematics and different forms of trigonometry and geometry to kind of discover how to navigate a ship and how to actually discover new lands. So Coimbra is a UNESCO World Heritage Site because of its old university, and you'll be in this town and you'll get this feeling of kind of being in sort of Portugal's Oxford, Portugal's Harvard, so to say. But it's going to be a lot more history there because the most of the buildings that were used for learning over 800 years ago, they're still being used for learning. So uh, you have this mix and match of both being a very kind of a fresh college town, but at the same time just steeped with history all throughout all corners. And as well, because it's a town that's actually perched on the top, on a hilltop next to a river, you'll have stunning views as well of the surrounding areas and of the surrounding town also. So we'll get to stay overnight in Coimbra, and we'll get to enjoy kind of the delights of Coimbra on that afternoon and that evening. And then afterwards, on day 5, we'll be setting out towards Porto. And on our way to Porto, we're going to be visiting the beautiful Douro River and get the chance to enjoy the Douro Valley. Now, for those of you that are wine aficionados, you'll know that Douro wine is known as some of the best in the world. And we'll actually get the chance to visit a local winery and discover the delights of port wine, its form of how it's harvested, how it's grown, what makes Douro wine so special in comparison to other wines across Europe. What's the form and as to how it's crafted, and we'll have some lovely wine tasting and also a nice lunch in the Douro Valley. So we'll have a very scenic lunch as well. So we'll get to enjoy the scenic views of the Douro Valley, which is literally just a valley covered on all corners from vineyards, both left, right, center, up, down. Everywhere you look at, it's all wineries and it's all vineyards. And after our wine tasting and after our lunch, we'll get the chance to enjoy a nice little boat cruise on the Douro Valley and go on a short boat cruise across on the canyons that surround the river. Afterwards, we'll set off to Porto on a short hour-and-a-half drive, and we'll be staying in Porto for 2 nights. Now, for me, Porto is a very special city. Now, I love Lisbon. Lisbon is amazing, but I'm a person that's I prefer second cities, because they're the least known cities, but they kind of have a more of a kind of welcoming atmosphere and very proud people as well. So anywhere you go across in the world, you know that kind of people that come from secondary cities, they tend to be a lot more heartwarming and welcoming. And the same goes for Porto as well. Porto is really well known for various different things, for being Portugal's second largest city, but also for the namesake, port wine. And when we're going to be in Porto for the 2 nights, on day 6, we're going to get to enjoy a nice, lovely walking tour around the old quarters of Porto. We'll be going down the steps up towards the Douro River again, which is where Porto is on the banks of. And we'll have the chance to savor as well some more port wine. So this port wine will actually be different from the one that we'll have in the Douro Valley. This one will be port wine that has been aged and has been matured in Porto, and we visit one of the local wineries and one of the cellars to see where the wine is actually matured, how it's matured, and we'll have some more delightful wine tasting also at the end of our walking tour. So our hotel in this trip will actually be right on the banks of the Douro River. So we're going to be in the historical old quarter of Porto, and you'll get to have the scenic views overlooking towards the other side of the river, and you'll get to see the nice little longboats that were previously known back in the 19th and early 20th century for bringing port wine down in barrels across from the Douro Valley. And we have very scenic and stunning views in this hotel as well, where we're going to be staying at 2 nights. It's the Via Gale Porto Rivera. So it's a very nice hotel. And after Porto, what we'll be doing is we'll be going down towards Lisbon, but this time we're going to be taking the route over across the Atlantic. So on this trip, we're on day 7. What we're going to do is we're going to leave Porto and head down towards the town of Sintra, over on the Atlantic coast. And on our way, we're going to be stopping in 2 beautiful towns. We're going to be stopping in the town of Nazaré. And Nazaré is really well known for a couple of things, both for having some of the largest waves in the world, and it's the place where most of the surfers, the main pro surfers in the world, break their world records every year. And it usually tends to happen in the time of December and January. But we're going to be there in early November, so the weather's going to be much better. But Nazaré is well known for being a town that's split between 2 sides. There's the upper side of the town, and then there's the lower side of the town. And we're going to be visiting both sides. One side that's up on the cliff top, and then we're going to be visiting the bottom part. When we are going to be in the bottom part, you're going to get the chance to walk around and try some local specialities. Um, they are very unique, and they're a bit kind of the bit surprising for some. But one of the main local specialities that Nazaré is really well known for are barnacles. So if nobody has ever tried barnacles in their life, you really get the chance to try barnacles and see what they taste like at the moment. They're an interesting taste. If you do feel adventurous, most of my clients have said to me that when they've tried them, that they kind of have the mix of a kind of feeling between fish and chicken. So I wouldn't say so. I'd kind of be more towards fish, but kind of something like, I don't know, let's say probably squid, maybe something like that. But it's a unique thing to try out. So, and you can say to your friends that you tried barnacles. So that's for once. Yeah. And after Nazaré, we're going to be going further down south, and we're going to be stopping in the lovely town of Óbidos. Now, Óbidos is a medieval town. It's a walled medieval town that's also perched on a hilltop, but it has one of the best preserved medieval walls in all of Europe. So the entire village is surrounded by this very narrow and thin medieval wall that kind of just surrounds the entire town. And we're going to get the chance to walk around this historical town and do some final bits of souvenir shopping as well, if you fancy buying any Portuguese tiles, or if you fancy kind of buying some local crafts that are produced by local artisans. So this would usually tend to be ceramics, anything kind of towards that style of tiles, anything towards the ceramical side. If you haven't gotten it when we were in Tomar, you can get it now when we're going to be in Óbidos, and as well some local crafts also. And after Óbidos, it's going to be a short hour drive down to Sintra. And our hotel is going to be the stunning Arriva Sintra Hotel, which is on which is on the Atlantic coast, and there's going to be a beach right next to our hotel. Now, this hotel, I wouldn't say it's actually on the shore; it's on the seafront itself. So you'll actually be able to wake up in the morning with the 2 nights that you're going to be there and just soak up the stunning views of the Atlantic that's going to be right in front of you. And you'll be able to walk around on the beach that's literally just 2 steps next to us. And you can enjoy the scenic views of the Atlantic and enjoy the kind of the breeze of the Atlantic as well. That's going to be pretty nice at that time of the year in early November. And it's going to be all throughout a very relaxing way to kind of finish our final 2 nights of the trip. And being in Sintra, we're going to get to enjoy the local town centre of Sintra also. So Sintra was known as a place of escape for over 1,000 years. Back during the early medieval period, it was a place where many of the local Moorish rulers would have built their palaces to kind of escape from the crowded areas of Lisbon. And Sintra is really well known throughout the centuries. It's been a place of kind of this bit of mysticism, interesting energy, but everybody always feels at peace when you're in Sintra. We're going to be visiting two of the local palaces in Sintra. One of them is the Palácio Nacional, which was built by one of the former Portuguese kings, and he built it as a kind of an area of escape. So we'll get to see the interesting design and the architecture of that, of the palace, and you'll see the kind of the mix and match of different kind of styles that exist, all from medieval period styles to styles of Baroque to styles of kind of 19th century palaces, the ones that you kind of see throughout Europe. So it's a very quirky palace to visit. And to finalize it, then we're going to be visiting the Quinta da Regalada. Now, Sintra, because it was a town that was really well known for being a place of special energy, but also a place where the monarchs would tend to go to relax and to enjoy their weekends. Many lords and many aristocrats across Portugal were also at that time thinking, well, if this place is good enough for a king, then it's good enough for me. And you did have quite a number of quirky different aristocrats that would build their own palaces right next to the king's palace in Sintra. And one of these palaces was the Quinta da Regalada. And the Quinta da Regalada was built by a local duke who was very eccentric. He was a big fan of esotericism, and he believed that everything in this world is connected by both the mystical and the magical. So even if we are in the real realm, there would be a magical realm that would be right next to us. And this realm would only be able to connect with us in certain areas. And the Quinta da Regalada Palace is built specifically in such a way where it tries to connect people to the mysticism and the spiritual side of the other world that we don't know, so to speak of. And it is a very peculiar palace to visit. We'll be visiting some very interesting landmarks inside that palace when we're going to be there. I'd say everybody says that everybody who's been on a trip to Portugal has always said that this is by far one of their most favorite landmarks they visited when we were over there. And it just provides a sense of kind of just magic, so to speak, of on all sides, even though for somebody that isn't tilted towards the spiritual side, you do feel good after being in the Quinta da Regalada. So it does provide this kind of bit of quirkiness that it's very difficult to explain. So you have to be there to kind of see it, so to speak. And that will kind of end the afternoon for our day 8 on this trip. And on our final night, then we're going to enjoy a lovely dinner in the Arriba Sintra hotel where we'll be staying in, and to soak up the final views of the Atlantic coast. And on day 9, it's going to be a goodbye for us. And I will join you on the trip back over to Lisbon Airport, and hoping to see you again as well on either a trip again to Portugal or another trip sometime as well in the future somewhere else. Yeah, so this trip, as I mentioned, if you are a fan of either history or architecture, if you're a wine buff or a foodie, this is the perfect trip for you to enjoy. On this trip, we've everything included on most days. So we have 8 nights in superb accommodation. Our hotels in most cases are going to be 4-star hotels, and in Évora, we're going to have a lovely 5-star hotel that was a former palace. I'm going to be your guide throughout this trip. So if you have any questions or if you have any queries, I'll always be able to help you. So I'm going to be with you almost 24/7. So from the moment you wake up, and I'm going to say hello to you at breakfast, you're going to have me in the evenings. And if you need any recommendations as to which local bars to go to, what to eat, what to try out in each of the local towns, what are the specialities, you can always ask me. We're going to have breakfast included as well on most days of this trip, including day 1. That's a kind of a standard that I tend to do for most of my trips, because I know that you guys are flying from across the Atlantic, from across over from the United States. So it's always nice to kind of get everyone kind of all together for breakfast in the morning when you arrive. And we also have 2 lunches included. Both lunches are in the wineries in the Alentejo region and also in the Duero Valley. And we've 3 dinners as well. The dinner of fado music and the two dinners as well on our two final nights when we're going to be in the Ariba Sintra Hotel. As I mentioned, we also do have wine tasting. We have wine tasting in the Alentejo region, and we also have wine tasting in the Douro Valley and in the port wine cellars of Porto. We'll also have local guides with us. So I will be your guide throughout the trip, and I will be on the bus with you, going through and explaining the history of Portugal, the lifestyle of Portugal, the culture of Portugal, and the way of life of locals, and something that I've gotten to experience as well a lot because I've a good connection with Portugal. I've had a good connection with Portugal throughout my entire life since I was a kid. But also, and you'll get to have local guides with you when we're going to be in Lisbon and Porto. So you'll have the local guides from the city being able to tell you about the peculiarities of the city, what the locals know best, what are their favorite things about the city, and the bits and pieces here that only locals know, so to speak. So this tour is very much tilted towards discovering Portugal as a whole, but also discovering the unique local attractions of Portugal also. And as I mentioned, throughout this tour, we'll have most of the attractions I've mentioned throughout the trip included within. So all the entrances to the palaces mentioned, all the entrances to the convents, to the churches, this is all going to be included within this trip. And it encompasses a kind of all-in-one discovery of Portugal as a whole, both from the historical side, from the cultural side, but also from the foodie and from the wine side also. Yeah. And so, yeah, this trip is going to go on from the 27th of October to the 4th of November this year. I look forward to seeing you on this trip. And if you have any questions, please feel free to write either a comment or to forward a question either to Francis or to myself, and I look forward to answering them.
Wonderful. Well, that's a lot of great information. I have a couple of questions for you, Gabe.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what kind of weather to expect that time of year?
Yeah, so the weather in Portugal at that time of year tends to be very much mild. So you'll be looking at temperatures of about roughly the mid 60s to low 70s during that time of the year. And Portugal, being a country that is on the Atlantic coast, it does tend to have sometimes slight weather changes. So on occasions, you might have a day which will be completely sunny, but on occasions, you might have one or two moments of scattered showers. So it's always good just to bring a raincoat with you, just in case.
Okay.
But and the standard temperatures that you tend to look at for that time of the year, you'd be looking at high 50s to low 70s, and it would be on mostly sunny, with on occasion scattered showers and sometimes overcast. Yeah.
Okay. And this, just from reading over this itinerary and looking through it, you need to be able to do a good bit of walking.
Yes, well, when it comes to walking, we will be visiting some historical sites that will involve a bit of walking. So yes, these convents and these churches, they are they are easily accessible, but they do require walking in order to be able to see the site in full. Yes. Mhm.
Wonderful. Well, I don't think we have time today to go into the Christmas market store, but do you want to give us a real quick 2-minute summary of the Christmas markets in England?
Okay, yeah, perfect. So the Christmas Markets tour is another tour that I will be joining you guys in, and I'll be your local guide. And this Christmas market tour will be focusing on the beautiful towns of southwestern England. So we'll be beginning the trip by welcoming everyone into Windsor, which is right next to Heathrow Airport, and we'll be visiting Windsor Castle. We'll also be visiting Oxford, the local spa town of Bath, and Bath was a really well-known spa town since the time of the Romans. And we'll get to enjoy 2 nights in Bath. We'll also visit the beautiful villages of the Cotswolds, which are known in England and are designated in England as the villages of outstanding natural beauty because of their honey-colored stone design. And we'll also be visiting the town of Winchester in the county of Hampshire, which was home to the lovely and famous writer Jane Austen. And we'll be finishing this trip then with 3 nights in London, enjoying kind of the best delights of London. We'll be visiting the Christmas markets of Oxford, Blenheim Palace, and Winchester, as well as Bath, and also the Christmas Winter Wonderland in London for that trip. So that is a 9-day trip as well, and that will show the best of what England has to offer also.
Well, and we'll bring you back on live again and we'll go into detail about that trip. But I wanted to make sure people know about Portugal. It's coming up a little sooner. A couple of housekeeping notes for directions tours. We are excited. You may have seen the Facebook post earlier today that our catalogs have been delivered to the office. So if you're on our mailing list or if you'd ordered a catalog, hopefully that will be arriving in your mailbox. If not today, certainly this week. Also want to make sure everybody is aware that we are having a travel show on Thursday, April 18th. It will be in St. Louis at the Drury Inn, St. Louis Forest Park. You don't have to make a reservation for that. If you want to call and just let us know you're coming, you can, but that's not necessary. We have 2 sessions, one at 10 a.m., one at 5 p.m. So we can accommodate different schedules. We'll have vendors coming with us that are doing tours for us, like Gabe is, that will be able to tell you a little bit about their tours and give you a little bit more insight to those than we can, because somebody that is passionate about it can tell you better than somebody who hasn't been there before. So we're excited for that. Looking forward to that. Hope we have a big turnout for our travel show. So we've gone longer than we normally do today. Thank you guys for staying with us. And Gabe, I really appreciate you being with us. Tell us where you're coming from today. I don't think we did that when we started.
Oh yeah. So I was actually I was over in Iceland back 2 weeks ago with a trip doing the Northern Lights, and then I had another tour in Portugal now for just over 4 days over the course of Easter. And we got to enjoy as well the delights of kind of the Atlantic coast. So we did a trip from Porto down to Lisbon and those villages that I mentioned in for the past 4 days, and it was absolutely stunning. And over here right now, I'm in Spain, in southern Spain at the moment, where we're enjoying very mild temperatures, and it's in the low 70s at the moment. So we're soaking up the bit of spring sunshine, as I like to say. Yeah.
Wonderful. What time is it in Spain?
Over right now, it's just coming up to 11:15 at the moment. Yeah.
It's bedtime.
Bedtime, yeah.
That's bedtime. Well, we
Yeah.
appreciate you staying up and coming on with us, and we'll get you on the schedule to come back and talk about the Christmas markets. If anybody has any questions or wants more information or wants us to send them the full itinerary for this tour, be sure to comment that, and we will get that right over to you. Thank you again for being with me today, Gabe, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Have a great day.
Thank you, Francis, and thank you, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you shortly again. All the best.